It's hard, being a reporter.
But if it were easy, everyone would want to do it, right?
Right.
Afternoon, comrades.
Who are you guys?
Vigilantes for truth?
We're very entrepreneurial.
I'm in high school now, okay? Things are gonna be different.
I don't want them to be different.
You have to start doing some normal kid stuff.
Oh my God. Are those dead?
I thought I'd already written the most important story of my life, but this was bigger.
This town, there are all sorts of rules you gotta play by.
I think something in Erie Harbor is making people sick.
And they've been covering this up for years.
Messages keep getting clearer.
Oh my God.
And I ain't got nothing to say.
If we don't figure out what they're covering up, everyone in this town could be in danger.
We're not gonna let that happen.
Seriously, Hilde, you're like some old person Reddit feed, but like inside my house.
There's something happened somewhere.
This could be how we find Richie. He saw something, and that's why he got taken.
Baby, I just know this.
Criminal, trespassing, on a school night.
But in a purposeful way. For a good cause?
We can't start a fire.
You need to get control of your daughter.
Can't start a fire.
Is that supposed to be some kind of a threat?
Those guns were higher.
We have no idea what these people are capable of.
The hardest stories to cover are the ones you care most about.
We're young, but we are not stupid. I'm not afraid of you! They cannot stop her from speaking the truth.
Dancing in the dark.
Welcome, everyone, and especially young journalists, to this very special interview event. I'm Shira Center, the Globe's general manager for editorial, and I was a political journalist for 10 to 15 years, including for the Globe. I'm here today with a truly inspirational figure, a crusader for truth, the First Amendment, and a dogged reporter who breaks news, challenges the status quo, and never wavers in the face of authority. And that's really something, because when Hilde Lishak became a journalist, she was only 7 years old. Today, she's 14, and not only is she the youngest member of the Society of Professional Journalists, but her journalism for her publication, The Orange Street News, has been featured in the series Home Before Dark. The first season is available on Apple TV, and the second will be debuting soon. Welcome, Hilde. And welcome also to her father, Matthew Lishak, who is also a journalist, a relationship that plays out in the television series. Matthew is an investigative reporter for the New York Daily News and is the author of several nonfiction books. This conversation will focus on Hilde and her journalism with the goal of dispensing advice to the young reporters who are watching, and of course also the news lovers, young and old, who are admiring her work. If you want to hear more about Hilde's translation into a character on television, on Home Before Dark, I'd encourage you to check out last week's conversation with the producers and Hilde, hosted by the Globe's own Ty Burr. I also want to encourage the young journalists who are interested in Hilde's work to enter our Young Reporters Competition, done in collaboration with Apple TV Plus and Home Before Dark. Students 14 to 18 years old can enter the contest until May 31st. Please go to globe.com/homebeforedark to learn more. All right, a few housekeeping items before we begin. We'll be taking your questions throughout this event, so please use the Q&A function. The chat is closed, and we'll try to get to whatever questions we can. Additionally, we will be sending out tonight's conversation via email. We encourage you to share it with your friends, especially the aspiring young reporters in your life. So that said, let us get started. Welcome, Hilde. Welcome, Matthew. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Shira.
Great. So Hilde, I just want to start for our audience members who may not be as familiar with your stories. Let's talk about how you became a reporter. How did the Orange Street News come to be way back at the beginning when you were 7 years old?
Sure. So when I was really little, I lived in New York and my dad was a journalist, and I would follow him around a lot when he reported on stories. But when we moved to Pennsylvania, he'd quit his job, and I was not ready to stop reporting because I'd really started to like it. So I started my own newspaper, the Orange Street News.
Great. Do you remember anything about that first edition? Is there a special story that's maybe stayed with you?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but when I started my newspaper, it wasn't anything like it was towards the end. When I started it, I'm pretty sure my first issue was about how my neighbor was going off to college and how the dorms were gross and how my little sister was being born was like the front page.
Huh.
So that was the type of stuff I did at first. And I think it was my mom wanting a new car or something like that. Very different than what I do now.
Great. So tell us about that evolution. How did you go from writing about your neighbor's venture to college or your new baby sister to a lot of the crime news, the very demanding and difficult crime news that the Orange Street News became known for?
Sure. Well, I always knew that I wanted to do more like serious journalism, but when I first started, I just didn't really know how to approach that. So when I started, it was like it was a pretty gradual evolution. When I started, it was pretty boring stuff, honestly. And then I started reporting on vandalism. It was like the first serious stuff that I started reporting on. And I really loved that a lot because a lot of the other bigger newspapers weren't covering that sort of stuff. And people liked that I was covering the vandalism because people care a lot about it, but bigger newspapers might overlook that. So then I got more sources from that because people liked my reporting on the journalism. So whenever something would happen, a lot of people would call me and then I would get bigger stories slowly.
Great. And Matthew, obviously you're an accomplished journalist in your own right. What kind of role did you play with Hilde on? Were you more of an editor? Were you more of a mentor? Both?
We moved to Pennsylvania. I got sick of journalism and, Hilde didn't. And I guess my role with you, Hildes, was, we thought she was just going through a phase. We didn't know that this would last for so many years. We thought, we just kind of ignored it. I mean, Hilde, you didn't mention this. Her first paper was handwritten, and she tried to sell it to us for a dime. And it wasn't that good, Hilde.
You got to start somewhere.
I think our biggest role, my wife and I, Bridget, she's working right now, but was that we just left her alone. As strange as it sounds, she was the only kid her age allowed to bike into town, for instance, and we trusted her at the age of 7 to go out. She had I think a 5-block radius that you could bike and 5 or 6 into town.
I don't think I listened to that.
Yeah, I don't think you did either. But that was probably my biggest influence. Of course, every now and then when she'd post something, her sister would help her with the tech aspects, but I would, be like, Hilde, a little too many exclamation points. Or I also gave her a really easy template. I gave you like that. Remember that?
Yeah.
I gave her like a news story template.
What did that consist of?
Nobody wants to hear from me.
It was like a 5-paragraph template for stories, like the lead, the nutgraph, the quote, the support, and the kicker. And that's what I followed for. Like the first 2 years of my newspaper.
Yeah, every story was 5 paragraphs.
Every story was like that 5-paragraph template. So it was very helpful.
It was cool because you could just fill it in, right?
Yeah, it was so easy to do because the writing was something that I wasn't like a huge fan of at first. I really just like reporting and talking to people. So it was like pretty easy. Once I got that story template, it became so much easier for me.
I think that 5-paragraph template is not too far off from what a lot of breaking news reporters straight out of college follow. It's not too far off. So talk to me a little bit about the sources you developed over your time at the Orange Street News, because I think this is so important and so unique. How did you develop sources, and most importantly, how did you figure out if they were trustworthy?
So I always, like figuring out if a source is really trustworthy, I would always double check it no matter like how long I've had it. I would always try to get more information on it. I would never just take somebody's word for it. And if I did, I would always just make sure like a source told me and not like presenting it as a fact in my story. And as for developing sources, it was really just, I was covering stuff that were really important to the people, like vandalism, that big papers didn't really care about. So people really started like to trust me after that. Also, I was a pretty active part of my community. I think every Friday I would go and I'd bike down to businesses and I would just talk to like everyday people. And most of the times they wouldn't have any stories, but I'd leave like my business card or my number before I had business cards. And then whenever something would happen, they would call me.
What did your business card say?
I think it was just Orange Street News, and then it had my email and my number. And I think I got them after maybe like a half a year of my newspaper, but I was so excited for it because I think I just got like the website and the business cards at the same time. And my dad took me to Staples and I like printed out like 500 or something. And it was really exciting.
Did you hand out all 500?
I think I still have some because I have a lot of them actually.
So your first big news story, one of the first big news stories was that homicide. I'm interested in how old you were and walk us through a little bit how you got that story and what happened after that, and perhaps some of the criticism that you received from it.
Sure. I think I was 9 years old, and I remember I was reporting on a story about a chocolate store in my town. I was with my best friend, and basically it was like it was always once a year, basically all of the businesses would like put out chocolates and you can go and eat all the different chocolate stuff for free. And it was like a good way to draw business to the town. So it was always like a really like fun day because I would just go with my best friend and I would like report on it, but really I would just walk around and eat chocolate. So it was like it was a really chill part of the day at first. And then I got, I think it was an email that somebody had been murdered like a few blocks away from my house on 9th Street. And at first I like did not believe it. And then I think I saw like a siren going by. So I went to the police station, right? Because even, I wanted to take the chance. It was probably not true, but I wasn't going to risk it. And I remember one of the police officers was like, just like, not now, like something big's happened. Like, I can't talk to you right now. Because they already recognized me because I go there quite often. They usually don't talk to me. But I got there and I got there before a lot of the other media, or I got there before any of the other media. And I got out the story pretty fast. I got it out online. And I think it was hours before any other media reported on it. But after I reported on it, it got a lot of hate, which I wasn't really used to because I was used to, like, I knew my dad got a lot of criticism for the things that he reported on, but I'm a journalist, like my credibility is like all I really have. And it wasn't like I was getting attacked for the things I wrote in my story because all of my information is really true. It was just like for things I couldn't control, like stupid things like my age or my gender. And I just did not know how to defend myself to that.
And how did you end up sort of responding to that, if at all? Was it something you worked with sort of internally and just decided to shut the hate out, or was it something you responded to in the end?
Yeah, I think like 2 days later, after it all went, after I got all the hate for it, I made a video just reading some of the comments and basically saying like, I'm not going to be silenced. I think honestly it was mainly for my little sisters. I didn't really want them to see me being pushed around, especially for something that's really out of my control.
And Matthew, what was it like as her parent to see that criticism and hate come at her?
I like how Hilde handles these things. She generally ignores them. And our family does too. I mean, I was reporting crime for 15 years almost on and off. And, reporting news criticism, as you know, it's part of the deal. Like we all get criticized as journalists. But yeah, Hilde, no, you're right, Hilde. Like what you touched on is true. Like she was getting criticized for things she couldn't control. And I think my wife and I, our first reaction was this will blow over, ignore these people. But Hilde kept making a case that her credibility was being like that she has the trust of her readers. That's all she has, like she just said. And if she lets these things go unanswered, then it makes her look guilty. Because it's hard to understand this now. It wasn't just like 5 or 10 people in our town. It was a majority of the community were very upset with her. They were posting these things, including like the former mayor, town officials. And none of it was saying Hilde's information is not true. It was all more the vein of what's wrong with her parents? How is she doing this? Why is she out there? Should she be playing with dolls and shouldn't? So Hilde pushed back and we were okay with that. And her sister, Izzy, her older sister, always did the tech and filmed it for her and everything. Yeah, I mean, it's all hard, but we have 4 kids and it's all weird,
You're the father. Was it 4 girls, right?
4 daughters, yeah.
4 daughters. So the dolls comment made me think of a question, and Hilde, I hope you're comfortable answering this. Do you think it would have been different if you were a 9-year-old boy asking these questions? Do you feel that? Because a lot of female journalists shown actually get more criticism online than their male counterparts.
I honestly don't know. I try not to obsess over the reasons that people are going to attack me, but I do recognize how much harder it is a lot of the time for female journalists. Yeah. But I try not to obsess over that stuff too much, because the bottom line is it's out of my control when people are attacking me for all of this stuff. So I try not to obsess over it too much.
We obsessed over it though. My wife and I obsessed over it for her. And I don't, Hilde's interesting because in the beginning, I remember she never thought that it had anything to do with the fact that she was a girl. And now that she's a little older, I think when she looks back, I mean, and I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like your mind has sort of shifted a bit on that. Is that true?
Yeah, you're completely right. At first I was like, wait, this has nothing to do. I don't know. I try to think the best in people generally. And for me, it was a lot more, I don't know, for some reason, like when I was younger, it was a lot easier for me to think that it was because of my age than my gender, but I don't know, as I've gotten older, I try not to think about it too much, but I definitely think gender did play a role.
Yeah. Okay, back to the craft itself. Enough with the hate. I want to know, aside from your first big story about the homicide, the other sort of non-breaking news, how could you tell something was going to be a great story when you were 7, 9, 11 years old out reporting? How did you know?
Question.
I've always been pretty naturally curious. So I never really, when I'm reporting on a story, I would never think of like, oh, I wonder if this is going to be another viral moment or whatever. I would always just think I'm really naturally curious. So I'd always just think what interests me and what I would want to hear more about and what would be really important to the people. But generally it was just something that I would be really interested in and that I would want to find out more about.
That's great. Was it, do you have sort of a favorite story you like to write? Often in newsrooms, reporters are known for the features writers or beat reporters. Was there a certain kind of story that you felt like you specialized in?
I love crime stories so much, which sounds really strange to say, but I love reporting on crime. It's really just like a mystery. It's solving a puzzle.
This girl, it's terrifying. Because I remember there was a time where she was taking down a drug ring in our high school when she was 10.
Oh, gosh.
And this didn't get any credit, but the students trusted her and she got them all to go on videotape and black them out. And I remember there was one day where I'm in the living room with my wife and Hilde comes down with her bag. I'm like, Hildes, where are you going? She's like, oh, some people are picking me up. I'm like, no. But she was going to go do an undercover heroin thing in a nearby town. And I just remember I was kind of like, that would be a great story. And my wife looked at me and was like, I'll divorce you. You will be divorced. So Hilde was very upset with us, but she was not allowed to do it. But you still got a great story on that. But her passion for crime is very sincere and I've never seen anything quite like it. But I wonder if it's because when we used to go out in New York, it was always crime.
Yeah, definitely. It was just what I was used to.
Crime is really difficult to report on, especially when you're working with police departments, who I can imagine may not always want to speak to a youth about ongoings, right? Can you talk a little bit about how you got reluctant subjects to speak to you on the record or on background about crime?
Sure. With police, that was still something I was struggling with, right up until I stopped my paper. I think if you're a journalist and the police really just love you and want to give you tips, you're doing something wrong. I think police and public figures should have at least a little bit of hatred towards you. But with police, I had a few people there who were willing to give me some tips, but it was really it was always an uphill battle. I would wait at the police station. I remember being little waiting at the police station in the Pennsylvania winters for hours until they came back.
They hated you. They hated you, Hilde.
And what was that like for you, Matthew, to know the police department was stonewalling your daughter's requests at every turn? How do you encourage her?
Doing a good job. I thought it meant she was doing a good job. But one thing was I made sure she knew her rights. That was another part that they, for instance, would not hand her criminal complaints sometimes. They just wouldn't. But Hilde by then had such a big platform, she would just post one message on Facebook and the office would get flooded with phone calls. Also, the assistant district attorney, remember that guy? He worked against you as much as he could. But I always feel like, and I always told Hilde this, it's part of the deal. You're going to have to work against people in a position of power as a journalist, and that's your job. And you have to get around that. It's an obstacle I think all journalists should accept. And when they get a police officer or public official or person in power who's cooperative, that's great too. But it's just, in my experience and yours as well, I'm guessing it's very rare.
Yeah. So Hilde, I'm going to take a quote from your conversation last week with Ty. If you take yourself seriously, then they take you seriously. I was hoping you could expand upon that for other young journalists in terms of how to work with sources who aren't taking you seriously, right? What tips and methods do you have for them?
All right, sure. So a lot of times, right, it would be like a really serious story that I'd want to report on, right? And I would, especially, it would work a lot better when I was like littler, but I would go, right? And I'd knock on the door and I'm like, hi, I'm Hilde, I'm a reporter. And they would think like it's like some sort of school thing. Like I'd never lie to them, of course. I would tell them it's the Orange Street News. But especially before I like covered the murder, they didn't really know who I was, so they were just like a little bit confused. So I was like, can I interview you? And then I would start filming, right? Of course, with their permission. And I would start asking them these like really difficult questions. And you can tell that when I started like really like taking myself seriously, their demeanor just like completely changes. And they actually are like, oh wait, yeah. And then they'll actually start answering your questions a lot more seriously.
Yeah, wow. Hilde's never let us come to her. Hilde's never let my wife or I ever actually watch her report. So the only thing we get to see are the videos that she posts. And there's a few that you watch, and it's really amazing how you see the subject's disposition change. They're smiling and like, oh, little girl. And then I think of the superintendent of your high school when you pinned him down on the drugs. That was like painful for me to watch because he was not expecting that. And it was a great interview. And there's been a few times where after the interview, my wife or I would get a phone call from whoever she interviewed, and they'll say, hey, I think, your daughter just interviewed me, but I think I might have said some things I didn't mean to. And we'd always say, we had a wall in our family between the paper and family life. Like that was Hilde's paper. She put the work in. So yeah, we would just say, well, you're going to have to call her because if she finds out that you called her parents to get her to change her mind, then she will not be flexible or helpful to you.
That's like when you call someone's editor, right? Instead of a reporter. It's really frustrating. So we have a couple questions from the audience that I'm going to interweave into this. A reminder that if you have questions for Hilde or for Father Matthew, you can put them in the Q&A. We will get to what we can. So this is from Carl. In the show, the school and teachers are not portrayed as being supportive of your reporting and writing efforts. Is this a true reflection of your experience? Has this changed since your reporting efforts have become more publicized and well known?
I think I was pretty lucky. I think when I started my newspaper, I was in 1st or 2nd grade, and my teacher was like really amazing. She was really supportive. I remember she was one of my first subscribers. She was always really supportive of like my journalism and my writing. But I think that's pretty rare, sadly. So I think you just kind of have to like deal with it. I don't think you can really expect that. You can't really expect like adults and people around you to be super supportive of you. You just have to be really self-motivated.
And did that change as the Orange Street News and your efforts gained more publicity? Did people take you more seriously, or did you encounter even more pushback?
I was homeschooled after 2nd grade for a while until I moved to Arizona. So I didn't really have to deal with the teachers. I think it had something to do with the town, like not liking me that much that my parents pulled me out of school. But when I moved to Arizona, it was a bit strange because I think some like teachers were like scared I was gonna like report something on them. But I just try not to think about that stuff much because it doesn't really affect me. I do remember though, one time I was at school and it was after I had reported on a situation with the marshal who everyone in the town loved, and I had like exposed him online. And I was in school one day, and a teacher from the elementary school came in, and she like kind of went on this rant about how the marshal is like such a good guy, which I don't really know him. You know, I just like posted what happened to him, and how he's like such a good guy, and how he's so like misunderstood. So that was a bit strange.
Knowing her audience, you were in the room. Interesting.
Yeah, it was a really small school too. It was like 7 people in the room because it was, yeah.
Wow.
So that was a bit weird.
We took her out of that school after that day.
Okay. That's it. So another question for Hilde. Do you watch a lot of crime documentaries? Are there specific documentaries or crime shows that are influential to you? And do you see film as a medium you'd ever explore as a journalist?
That's a good question. I used to like crime stuff a lot more when I was little, weirdly enough.
You used to love Law and Order, I remember.
Yeah. Me and my best friend at the time, Arabelle, we used to watch Law and Order a lot. But I used to really like Law and Order. I don't watch that much anymore. I really still like, I forgot the name of it. I like crime documentaries. All that stuff's really fascinating to me. And I think it'd be fun to go into that one day. I'm keeping my options open. I could see myself being interested in that one day. I don't know, narrators of those shows, I always find like so strange because they'll just say like the most gruesome stuff in like such like a calm like voice. Like it's very strange.
I could see you doing that.
I do that, I feel like.
Yeah, you could do that.
So a couple more questions about how you go about your work. How do you think of what questions to ask during an interview? Do you plan them out ahead? Do you think about them on the spot? How do you go about that?
I usually think of them, I usually plan them out ahead, and I base it off like who, what, where, when, why, how, because that's what I always have to get, for my story. And if I like know I'm going to do an interview and I have some time to kill, then I'll like write out like my lead, my nutcraft, my quote, my support, my kicker. And I'll just like, a lot of times they can be kind of predictable. So I can like write a little mock story and think of what information that I need to get for them and what questions I need to ask them. But sometimes I'll just be talking to people, like trying to get news tips, and they'll have a story for me right there, which is rare, but sometimes it happens. And I'll have to think of questions on the spot. So I'll just like go off who, what, when, where, why, how. And also I always write in my notepad, like picture, because I always forget to get pictures and names. Yeah. So I always write picture and name in my notepad so I don't forget that.
And let me just throw something in for Hilde. Like one of my favorite parts of her journalism is when like you're really good at the follow-up. And I feel like your best part of Hilde's best interview skill to me is her listening. Like she really listens. So I see some reporters who they'll have their questions and they'll just go down the list waiting for the person to end with the answer before. But Hilde will really listen and she'll throw out all of her questions if she sees it going a different way. I'm thinking of the interview you did that I saw online where some college kid was vandalizing plants and Hilde got him to confess online, like wow, in his audio. And like the guy was terrified of her. You could hear his voice. He kept saying, I really want you to believe me. I only did it once. And Hilde kept being like, I don't think you did it. Oh, here's the evidence. And it kept shifting. And I could tell you threw your questions away and you were really listening to him because that gave you the ability to ask the good follow-ups.
Yeah, follow-ups are probably my favorite thing.
Yeah.
Wow, you really have to think on your feet so well to do that. And listen.
It takes practice, honestly. It's not like a skill I was born with. If you practice at it, you'll get better at it.
And so you talked about the sort of the 5-paragraph format. What about stories that are longer or more in depth with that? How do you tackle the writing process there and also editing? Do you have an editor? Does someone proofread? How do you fact check?
So my mom is like a certified like English teacher, but I'm so bad at grammar. It's terrible. My spelling is like one of the worst things. Sometimes I would have my dad look over my stories, but his spelling isn't any better, so he like wouldn't see it. I would have, I would spell check, and I would like get emails from people with like grammar corrections sometimes, which is weird, but it was helpful, I guess. And then with longer stories, I would really struggle with the writing process when I first started like my newspaper, because I'd go with my dad when he was reporting, but I would never like sit down with him to write a story. And so when I'm doing longer stories, it'd be like the lead, the nut graph, a quote, a support, and then another quote, and then another support, and then a kicker usually. Or like, and I can kind of fluctuate that, like depending on like what information I need to get in there. But usually I'll just add another quote and another support graph.
And in terms of editing, like we had to, Izzy, her older sister, did all the social media stuff and did a lot of that. But every now and then I'd have to look in for legal reasons. You know, when she's using people's names like in a homicide, I'd have to, yeah. So we would look in once in a while. But in the beginning, we never really did a lot. We just, because no one was reading your paper the first few months. So we were just, yeah. But once she was getting 100,000 views a week, we had to make sure that we weren't going to get sued. So be like, Hilde, just can you double check this, please? Make sure you're calling this person a X, Y, and Z, that you can back it up. And she always could, except for that skunk.
I don't remember that, but I've heard about that from you. You won't let me live it down.
She once like posted a story calling a skunk rabbit. It was about a rabid skunk in Selinsgrove. She had no proof. She had no proof. She couldn't back it up.
I remember that, but
I like to burn it up to her.
He brings it up a lot. He does.
Oh gosh. I once had an editor tell me that reporters are either reporters or they are writers, like they specialize in one or another. And it's so interesting to me because I do think one of the incredible things about that, the job of being a journalist, is you have to pull from these two very disparate skill sets, right? And that in other people might not exist. You have to have a combination of both to really be successful. So it's interesting to hear you talk about the way you've gone about both of those.
I was always envious. So like, you know, with my newspaper, I was like, I didn't have anybody else. So it was like just me. And I was always really envious because my dad would tell me that sometimes he could just like report on a story and then he'd be able to like call in and like his editors could like fill in the information like for a story.
That was usually, it was rewrite. Like I would do the interviews. I'd send my notes and somebody else write the story and put my name on it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was always so envious of that, because I wanted to just to like have somebody like sitting at my house and I could be like, hi, like all this information is like X, Y, and Z. I did all these interviews, and they can just kind of like fill it in for me. But I didn't have that.
I have heard about that. And I think some publications do still have the rewrite person, but so we don't, not so much at the Globe anymore. It's from a couple decades ago. So Hilde, this question is from our audience. You're so wise beyond your years. What do you like to do when you're not reporting? And do you watch TV? Do you scroll Instagram? What do you do for fun?
I really like sewing, and I just started crocheting, and I really like that. I'm making a bucket hat right now. I really like watching, I love American Horror Story. That's like my favorite show in the entire world. I've watched it. I mean, don't watch that unless your parents tell you can. But it's really good, and you should ask them if you're over like 14. But it's a really, really good show. It's amazing. I rewatched that show.
Are they paying you? Are you getting a fee from them?
Sponsor me, please. But I'm not sponsored. I love American Horror Story. My favorite show. I've rewatched it like 20 times. I like people like give like me like the wise beyond my years comment a lot. I like talked in a baby voice until I was like 11. And I was like really, really obsessed with like dolls and like tea parties when I was younger, which is weird because I'd always have those comments that are like, you should be like playing with dolls and having tea parties, which I did a lot. I would really love that stuff. But I'm not a normal kid. I love to go on walks. I really like coffee.
Not normal.
And I understand you're also interested in acting, right?
Oh my gosh.
What you wanted to do about the future.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm like all over the place. Yeah, I love acting so much. My parents took my newspaper away, so that's really sucked. But one benefit of that is I've been able to like explore other things that I'm really passionate about, and I really love acting and filmmaking a lot. A lot of people don't know this, but Brooklyn's mom, Courtney, is actually a fantastic acting coach, and she's been giving me acting lessons, which is so much fun.
Do you have a dream part that you'd like to play?
Don't go into American Horror Story, please.
I would love to play, like there'd never be any like revival of this. But in Asylum, Sarah Paulson's Asylum's second season, and Sarah Paulson's character in that, which is like Lana, so amazing. I would love to do that role. I don't know if I could pull it off, but it's absolutely brilliant acting.
Somebody's gonna watch this and call Child Protective Services. So it'll be
All right, back to journalism, because I want to ask you about something that happened after you moved to Arizona. By the way, we will talk about the Orange Street News hiatus in a minute, but I want to talk to you about when you ran into the Border Patrol agent. Can you describe what happened there and how you stood up for your First Amendment rights?
Yeah, sure. So it was about 2 years ago, and I was reporting on a story about a possible mountain lion on the way. So I was biking around, and the marshal had pulled me over, and I started filming the interaction. He told me that if I didn't stop filming him, he would throw me in juvie. But I knew my rights, so I kept filming him, and I posted it. And I knew my rights because, like, for a reporter, knowing your rights is just so important. I always knew that the First Amendment wasn't just something that you learn about in civics class. It was like the armor you wear when you go out and report on the story. It's so important for every kid, even if you're not a reporter, to know all of your rights. And I know that if the people in power could control how we get information and what we can or can't film, then we would basically just be slaves to the people with the most money or power.
And so there was a fair amount of fallout from that, right? The Border Patrol agent was sanctioned, correct?
I think so. The town ended up apologizing to me because it went pretty viral. I think he resigned now, like a month ago. But yeah.
In his resignation, he blamed Hilde.
I'm going to be really honest. I did not see it, but I heard he resigned.
I was really proud that Hilde filmed it, and we demanded the apology from the town as well, because your audience should know that the right to film law enforcement in public, it's really not so much for somebody like Hilde who's going to be okay, but in a lot of the bad neighborhoods, especially where we lived in New York, where we reported on, it's a law enforcement officer's word against sometimes somebody who does not have the clout that Hilde does. And the videotape's the only thing, as we've seen this past year, how videotape and law enforcement interactions have been pivotal to establishing the truth. And without that right, I mean, so I was really glad that Hilde affirmed that, because initially the town took the marshal's side and said that Hilde shouldn't have videotaped.
Oh.
I think they posted a statement on their website about it.
They did. And that's where we were really unhappy. Because it didn't make any sense. So we are really proud of Hilde for standing up for her rights, and because it's important for everybody to have that right.
To be a fly on the wall of the dinner table conversation that evening. My goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I remember that.
Wow. So another related question also from the audience. Have you ever been threatened with a lawsuit?
I think quite a few times. I've never taken it seriously. I think that's one of my parents' job. I've definitely been threatened with many lawsuits, I think.
Somebody from the district attorney's office, the lawsuits come at us, and somebody from the district attorney's office in Snyder County threatened us with a lawsuit for Hilde reporting on the homicide. And their reasoning was, and I kid you not, Shira, I know you're a reporter, so you'll know how appalling this is, that they told other media not to report on it, and the other media listened. And Hilde did not listen, and that could have been harmful to their investigation. The suit went nowhere, but they wanted us to. It was a threat to take the story down or lawsuit. And there was another time where Hilde, when you took down that volunteer fire company for fraud or something, and he called me and he threatened to sue us.
Yeah.
If you didn't take but we've never taken a story down, because the thing that I would do is I go to Hilde, can you back all this up and show me your evidence? And that story in particular, we had tons of evidence. DHL, remember that?
I do remember that.
So it seems like you've been threatened, but none of them have materialized or resulted in court proceedings, right?
Yeah. Pretty empty threats.
So let's talk about the Orange Street News. I understand it's been on hiatus for the last year. Describe that decision, Matthew, Hilde, and tell me if you miss it.
I think you need to ask him because I did not have any part in that decision, but I do miss it.
If anybody in the audience sees like a knife coming from behind with her hand, blink frantically. You know, look, I know we're the bad guys here. It was a really hard decision, but Hilde has been working so hard at her newspaper since she was 7. And our feeling was that as parents that it was kind of obsessive and we wanted her. Hilde doesn't spend any time with people her age. Throwing that out there, Hilde. She just had been living this extremely irregular life, and we just thought that taking the paper away, putting it on pause, however you want to phrase it, while she settled into some sort of normal for her, would open herself up to other ideas. The other fear was that everybody looks at Hilde and knows that she's such a skilled journalist, but what if Hilde didn't want to do that? What if there was something else she wanted to do? I didn't want, and my wife didn't want her to ever feel boxed in by that decision of other people. Not that I think you would ever but it could get heavy of all the expectations. So I'm really excited to hear Hilde say she's into acting, and I know she also enjoys science in school and crochet. And she has a lifetime to go. Like when she's 18, she could do whatever she wants.
Yeah. So Hilde, does that sound about right to you?
It makes sense, I guess. I do. I'm actually glad. I found a lot of like other interests and things I want to do that I wouldn't have found if I was still reporting. Although the timing's pretty awful because, you know, now that we're in a pandemic, I have absolutely nothing really else I can do. But I really like sewing. I have a sewing machine. I have a job now, which is fun. I'm bussing tables.
And washing dishes.
Yeah.
You can pick up some good news tips that way, right?
I mean, but there were months when she was 9. There were months where she did 70 stories in a month. I mean, the amount of work she was doing at such a young age, it was scary to us as parents. So we wanted to slow it down a little bit.
So I am curious about that. Like when you're reporting, what were your weeks like? How many hours did you spend reporting versus schoolwork versus other fun stuff? Like how much of an endeavor was this?
Well, so when my parents pulled me out of school. So my mom was like homeschooling me. So like, but it was a very, very heavy focus on writing for like years. So basically it'd be like incorporated to my schoolwork. So I would wake up and I would report. I would wake up, you know, I'd bike into town. I'd try to get like news tips, all of that. And I'd be doing that for like, I don't know, until like 4 or 5 p.m., just depending on how quickly I can get in. Like sometimes it was like 3 stories a day. If I was doing like criminal complaint stories, which were a lot easier. But and then afterwards I would just play Minecraft with my friend Kristen, and that's really all I did. I would do a lot of reporting, and then I'd like hang out with her.
When she did something wrong, which she really didn't do much wrong, but when she did, we'd punish her by taking away her paper for a day. Like, sorry, no journalism today, Hilde. You're gonna play games all day today.
Another question from our audience. Hilde, do you want to go to college? And would you ever want to write for a newspaper that is not your own?
That's a good question. If you would have asked me this maybe like a year and a half ago, I would have said, no, I don't want to go to college because with the profession I'm in and with journalism, then I don't really think I need to. And I don't think that would be a great environment for me as a reporter. But now there's a lot of other stuff I want to do. And I'm just trying to keep my options open. I'm trying not to fail out of school, which is harder than you think it would be. But that's besides the point.
Well, we bumped her up a grade. We moved her up a grade to challenge her a bit. You're doing well. Hilde, you're doing well.
You seem pretty bright to me.
I'm thinking about it. If I decide to go more into journalism, then I don't think I will. But if there's something else I want, I'm trying to keep my options more open than I did like when I was younger.
In terms of the other newspaper, a funny story for your audience, the New York Times brought her in and she sat into an editorial meeting there, and the publisher the managing editor wanted to meet her, and it's like, hey, Hilde, in a few years, would you like to work here? And Hilde looks him in the eye and says, no, thank you. I like to be my own boss.
Seriously? How old were you when you said that?
When she told me this story, I wanted to pass out.
How old were you when you said that?
I don't know, 8, 9, 10.
It was yeah.
Was it with the scholastic stuff?
I think so.
Yeah, then like 11.
All right, I'm gonna pull the classic reporter trick and ask you one final question. Hilde, is there anything else you'd like to add to this interview in terms of advice for other young journalists?
The best advice I can give for journalists is just don't sit at a desk all the time waiting for stories to come to you. I was the editor, the publisher, the reporter of the Orange Street News. So I didn't have any sort of assignment editor. So I'd always have to generate my own story ideas. So I'd always try to be a really active part of my community because real people have real stories. And if you go, you can talk to anyone, just really listen in to what the normal everyday people have to say. And they'll have amazing stories. I just don't sit at a desk waiting for press releases or handouts from the police. Really just get out into your community. And I promise you, the more time you spend exploring the world around you, the more stories will find you.
Okay. Hilde, Matthew, we're at time for today. I just want to thank you so much for your time. And Hilde, thank you for everything you do. Matthew, thank you for everything you do too to support Hilde. It's been such a pleasure. I was a young journalist myself.
Questioners, your great questions from your audience too. Thank you.
They do have great questions, and they learned terrific tips from Hilde too about how to ask questions. So,
thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Same here, same here. Thank you so much. I'd like to remind our audience members that if they're interested or know someone who might be interested in entering our Young Reporters competition, that is open until March 31st. And Hilde, I believe you are a judge on that competition. So she looks forward to reading your entrance, right?
Yeah, definitely. Very exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And many thanks from the Boston Globe and Home Before Dark and Apple TV.
Thanks. Bye, guys.